back to the class, everyone. We are finally at the final conquest for this conquest series, which means we need to have a crash course on the character that everyone who's been getting all the red crates or gold crates and passes is going to unlock, and that character is Admiral Trench. So Admiral Trench is already coming in a little bit different than the other crash courses that we've done recently. And I guess as a reminder, the whole point of this video, or these types of videos, is to explain how do we use this brand new character in the modern meta. We have done this both with Malgus and with Ben Solo. We've talked about their Omicrons, their mods, what team comps is going to be very important for Trench, but also how high do you take them up as far as relics go, or what modding do they need. That's the whole purpose of this video, is to kind of explore those things. That being said, Trench is going to be slightly different because he is specifically outfitted for TW. So while I do want to not just completely hide away from that fact, we're going to talk about TW a little, I also want to talk about what realistically is going to be good to do with him in GAC. So first, starting off just in general, what relics and what Omicrons does he need to be viable? As far as relics go, he is a support character, and if you really look through his kit, it seems to be pretty consistent. His damage is decent. If you want to compare it to another character out there, it's actually going to be very similar to Grandmaster Yoda's. Their special offense is almost identical. The only difference is Grandmaster Yoda's is actually a little bit lower, but his modifiers for his damage are higher. So you're looking about in that territory. Nothing super crazy like a Dark or a Fennec, but he's also not going to just be whiffing every other turn, kind of like Poggle would. So overall, that's kind of going to reflect where we want his relic levels. If you're just going to use him, and we'll get to this later on for comps, for just like a filler spot to make your geos slightly better, Relic 5 is honestly enough. Like, get him in there, get it to the point where a Datacron can actually be active, and just run with it. However, where I think most of us, and I wouldn't pull the trigger on this yet, I'm not going to be pulled the trigger on this yet, where I think most of us are going to actually want him is Relic 7, because I would be very surprised if we do not get a really good Datacron for the next set to really launch him off. Very similar to Afro, where he could probably just be getting a bonus turn every single time, to the point where he's not just killing a few Galactic Legends and Territory Wars, but where he's actually really hard to beat on defense. So Relic 5 for most of us. If he gets a Datacron, probably baller to push him to Relic 7. As far as modding goes, he definitely, to me, screams speed and potency. The reason why I want him to have speed so much is if we look into his net positive, he needs to be able to take turns to use his ability and give tactical supremacy for 2 turns to all of his allies, so that he's constantly giving them critical damage, potency, recovery, as well as advantage and foresight. So a lot of cool things to come in this. His basic is okay. Don't love it too much. I guess even with the Omicron, it doesn't seem to be super great to me. But the potency is nice just because the team as it sits doesn't really have a way to do tenacity down unless we're using the geo variation. We'll get that later. But he does have some debuffs that he wants to land here between stagger as well as shock, and I believe he has a stun in here as well. And he has no guaranteed way to do that. He does have a little bits of potency sprinkled throughout his kit, like he's got potency whenever there's tech or extortion out there, as well as I think it's even built into his unique a little bit, yeah, where they have 50% potency, but nothing huge. So what I think would be beneficial is a speed set, and then a potency set with a potency primary, and then probably either just protection or offense on the remaining triangle. The reason why we're talking a little bit about offense is because, again, very similar to Grandmaster Yoda, he actually does carry a little bit of damage if you want to use him in that way. And you could even argue for an offense set on him. I just don't think he's going to be the damage dealer in either of the comps that you're going to put together with him. So that is as far as modding goes. Omicrons, I personally won't be putting any of them on just because it's TW, and I'm very, very scarce with those. But the one that just seems like a no-brainer if you're really into TW is the leadership. And this is pretty consistent with both Malgus, I guess Malgus is GAC, but Malgus and Grand Inquisitor. Their best Omicrons is by far their lead. The amount of mastery and survivability that comes with this, and then also they just can't have their turn meter reduced, which is something that really mirrors a lot of the other Galactic Legends. Most Galactic Legends either can't have their turn meter reduced, or there's a really big penalty if you do, like SLKR, where they just eventually become invincible. The other thing that's happening in here is they have, for anyone who pays a lot of attention in Conquest, they have ruthless offense built into their kit, where the first time each enemy is reduced below 100% health, they gain 20% offense, and 5 speed stacking until the end of the battle. So again, very much for ruthless offense. If you've ever done that in Conquest, it's where exactly this, whenever you get the character below 100% health, you just start to really ramp up in damage. I believe swiftness might exist for turn meter, but the speed is also nice as well. So once this team can really get going, it's gonna have a good time. And that's where that's going to become really in handy too, is if you have Dooku on the team, which you really want to for a lot of reasons. His repost is going to allow him to hit underneath protection, and he's going to be able to drop someone from 100% under 100% health very quickly, versus, you know, where without Dooku you're going to have a really hard time doing it because you actually have to chew through all the protection. So that's the number one, is definitely his leadership if you're wanting to do Omicrons. The next one that's really important, I wouldn't say really important, but that could be kind of nice, is going to be his unique. It does a few things that don't seem super important, depending on what the enemy team is doing. Like if they're resisting debuffs, they get, you know, less critical damage and tenacity. I don't see that as super important. But then when we go down to the rest of this, it pretty much just makes the team super survivable. I think this is going to be more of a defensive Omicron, because if you have a team that's trying to just get through and kill characters on the team, the amount of protection and healing you're going to have stacked on top of the healing over times and the protection over times is going to make things just a whole lot harder. It also adds a little bit of speed. And then last and least is going to be his basic. Basic actually seems kind of cool. My only issue with this is the team doesn't have a lot of counters or mass assists or just assisting in general. So you're only going to use the basic when you get to your own turn. And all it does, the ability block is nice. We've seen that. I think Malgus' special Omicron has that as well. And then also reduces their critical damage and removes turn meter and recovers health and protection. Again, this would be a lot cooler, I think, if you had some way to gain retribution, and maybe that'll be a part of the Datacron. But as it stands as a whole, I don't think I'd really recommend this to anyone. So again, speed and potency as far as modding goes, and then if what we want for his Omicrons is leader, unique, and then basic. I probably would only advise doing the leader right off the rip. So next thing we need to talk about are team comps, and this is the most important part of the video, because Trench is doing something very new that not a lot of characters are doing. When most characters are coming into the game, they're either doing one of two things. They're coming in and reinforcing an old faction to make it slightly better, very similar to Ben Solo on the Raid team. The Raid team has existed for years. He's coming in, he's making it slightly better. The other type of character we've been getting has just been completely taken over as a new lead. Dash is a pretty good example of this. The Smugglers weren't doing so hot. He came into the game as their new leadership and built them back up. Trench is doing something brand new, and I don't know if I like it. And what he's doing is he's coming in and he's actually stealing from 3 to 4 existing teams that are all really good to make his own team. And I don't know if I can advise this for most people. And I think it's really going to come down to, are you a Territory Wars junkie? If you're a Territory Wars junkie, this is going to be probably a great move, because not only is the team going to be able to challenge Galactic Legends and Territory Wars, but the way that CG has built up Territory Wars over the last couple months is that all of the other teams are going to be just fine without the respective units. What do I mean by that? So this is the team that CG wants you to have. They want you to have Want, Newt, Count Dooku, and Jango here. Not just because, and this is important, not just because of things that are in their kits, like Extortion and Tech. Those are two things that come up a lot in Trench's kit, but there's a ton of indirect things. There is Burning Synergy. There is that 100% health synergy we looked at it for Dooku. And not to mention, when we look at Newt, yes, he is bringing something to the table with Extortion, but his unique, where he's also doing 5% max health damage to every enemy whenever a debuff is applied. The Trench team is full of debuffs. They have a ton of them. So we just have things that are going off the walls here that just make this team the best move. Again, the big issue with that is you're going to have to break up 3 existing teams, and that's a really hard pill to swallow. So I'm going to give some recommendations on ways that we can make that up, but I can't promise it's worth it. I can't even promise that gearing up Trench is going to be worth it if you're going to have to sacrifice those other teams, even if a Datacron comes out. So that's a decision you as a player are going to have to make. But as far as tools, what can we do? So Jango's a really good home under the Mandalorian's team right now. If you had Lord Vader, all is wonderful there. You don't necessarily need to have Jango on that team. That's one solution. Grievous in GAC. Grievous's best counter right now is beating Starkiller. BB-8 still does that. He does not need Newt necessarily to accomplish that. I prefer Newt, but BB-8 can accomplish it just as much. If you are in TW, Droidic Omicron is amazing. Really, if you have to apply another Omicron and you have Separatist, first one on Trench, second one on Droidica, maybe even reverse that. It's also worth noting that the Geonosians Poggle's Omicron is also really stinking good. So Separatists are set up for territories wars very well. The only really big issue that you're going to have is finding a replacement for Watt under C. That is really where C is being used the most right now. The armor, I have a little bit of issues with this because while the armor is very good with C, she's not a replacement for Watt. And by that, I don't mean she's inferior. Hold on for a second. I mean that she does different things for C than Watt does. If you look at the SLKR or the C counter to both SLKR and JMK, you don't need Watt at all. In fact, you might not even want him, or you don't need him at all. You might not even want him. Whereas armor is actually the one that you really want so you can stop all the crits so you can be able to survive. So basically what I'm getting at, this isn't going to work in all situations. You put armor with C against JML, JML is going to have her ability blocked and killed before she even gets a first or second turn. So that all to say, these are tools or these are options that we can look at, but this doesn't accurately fix all the problems. BB-8's great against the Star Killer, but GG doesn't beat CLS with BB-8. You need Newt in there to be able to deal damage twice, to be able to reduce, or really to be able to gain turn meter twice as fast and do double max health damage or whatever. So this is an option for TW for how to split your teams to be able to get the most bang for your buck, but again, my heart isn't totally set on it, especially for GAC. The one alternative that we have to this, and this is probably, if I do trench, this is probably what's going to happen unless the team that CG wants us to use is just absolutely magnificent in GC, which I don't know if I can see it, is actually trench with bugs. This comp is not terrible. If we go through and we look at Trench's kit, most of the things that he hates or that he's not going to want to work with is going to be non-droid Separatist allies. If you look at Geonosians, they're not droids. In fact, I believe there's only one clause in his entire kit where it says non-Geonosian. Yeah, when a non-Geonosian Separatist ally gains back to shield generator tech, which is from Watt. So if you're not using Watt, that's really not relevant at all. Geos can actually work a little bit here. I just don't know how much better he is actually going to make the team. If we look at Geonosian Brood Alpha's, his leadership ability, Trench's is superior by quite a bit, and that's because this hasn't aged well. So Geonosian Brood Alpha, he has his lead giving 15,000 max health and protection. When your characters are really low gear, say gear 12 like my Poggle, 15,000 health and protection is actually super cool. That's 50% to his extra protection, over 50% to his health. Very good. Like, you want those stat increases. Super cool. But once you start to relic your characters, this leadership ages very poorly. Like, if we open up my GBA, who's only R5, 90k protection. 90k. So that's only 1/6, and I don't think I can do that math right off the top of my head, but it's like 18% protection. That's a huge difference from a 50% boost. So basically what I'm getting at is those flat numbers, once you start to get into the relics, they're not that good. Not nearly as good as, say, a percent is, like 30% max health and protection that Trench Lead offers. There's also some other cool things in here where every single time you inflict a debuff on an enemy, your team gains 20% offense. Where this is going to be really cool is with, if you look at Geonosian Spy, he has an ability that can expose all enemies. So that's 100% offense boost that is going to have for the next 3 turns that he can come in with the Silent Strike and deal that much more damage. He already has ways of gaining a lot of crit damage as well as the damage modifier, and this goes up for buffs and debuffs and everything like that. So there is synergy here. He does make the Geonosian team better. I'm just not sure if he makes it better to the point where it's ultimately going to be worth it. I myself will probably pull the trigger if he gets a really good Datacron right off the bat. But even then, maybe this has more to it than meets the eye. If we look at Geonosian's Brood Alpha's kit as well, most of the Geonosian's value isn't even in his leadership, so adding Trench into it is really a net positive. I guess we're going for puns now. But he's got he does have this that is just completely separate from his lead, where everyone is still assisting, dealing a little bit less damage, 50% less damage, independent of the Trench leadership. So still have that going for you overall. So just as a review, I think this is probably going to be the way we're going to do it as far as relic levels and Omicrons, either 5 or 7, depending on if he gets a Datacron. As far as Omicrons, his leadership is definitely number 1, unique number 2, special number 3. Modding, speed, and potency may be an argument for offense and potency. And as far as team comps goes, we can either play this really fun game that CG wants us to play, where you really have to kind of have a max roster to actually deal with this too. This probably isn't applicable for a lot of people watching this, so there's that. Or we can go the GAC route and see if this is really worth it. Again, I just don't know I can't really think of something that this is going to change radically on, but this is the best that we have to work with, or at least I believe it is. If you disagree and you think there's a better way that we could be using Trench in TW or GC, please let me know in the comments. But until the next time, thank you guys for watching. Stay awesome.